My name's Emily Stiles, and I'm the Assistant Director for Career Development here at RPI. And I'm also one of the career counselors for the School of Engineering. So it's myself, Lindsay Debner, and Kristen Kettering. We all serve the School of Engineering. I often work with aeronautical engineering students, but I can work with any engineer, and same for all of the other counselors. So I just wanted to kind of give them a brief shout out, as many of you may have or will meet with them as well. So just a little bit more about the CCPD. One of the services that we offer is hiring stats from alums. So at the end of every year, we gather information on that class year about what they're doing after graduation. So we cover things like graduate school, going into the workforce, where they're going to work, what industry they're working in, job titles, and what their salary is. And our hopes is that this can help current RPI students who are looking into starting to think about their job exploration and what's next in terms of after graduation. So I wanted to share some of those stats with you today so you can see some of the outlook for aeronautical engineering and what your peers are doing after graduation. So some employer examples, in addition to those who are here today, but where students, go to work after graduation. And again, this is only for aeronautical engineers. This is where they're going after graduation. So they're working for companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Pratt and Whitney, Raytheon. This is just to name a few, and I neglected to mention this before, but all of this information, the full report of these statistics is on our website. So it's a really great way to start doing research on the different companies in the industry, as well as graduate schools for those who might be interested in continuing on after graduation to a master's or PhD program. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is Handshake, which is our career management system and a really great way to search for jobs, whether they're full-time internships or co-ops, and a great way to do some research on different aeronautical companies in the industry. So I went in very briefly and did a very quick search of some aeronautical engineering related positions. So as you can see, I found a job at BAE Systems as a missile, aerospace, and mechanical engineer. I found full-time positions as mechie and aero design engineers, as well as internships in the aerospace and mechanical field at a company in Bedford, Mass. So there's really a lot of different opportunities listed in Handshake, no matter what you're looking for in terms of jobs. So what I recommend is going into Handshake and doing a search, and be open to the search terms. Use keywords, use your major, use aerospace or aeronautical, and see what comes up. You might not get exactly what you're looking for, but maybe you see a new company that you think might be of interest to you. The great thing about Handshake is you can also research companies through Handshake because they have company profiles where you can get information on what they do. You can also get information on other students' experiences at this company. So it's a great way to gain information as well on top of a job search. So the next report is salary statistics. So this is taken from the class of 2018. We're still compiling the class of 2019, but of those reporting, the average salary for aeronautical, for students who majored in aeronautical engineers upon graduation, the average salary was $65,936. And the range was $55,000 to $77,500. So this might give you an idea when you're preparing for the job search, what is an expected salary potentially, and what is the average for those graduating from RPI. There are some other things to consider, such as geographic location, maybe some other, benefits offered by the position, but this is just looking at salary. I also did some further research to see what the overall median pay for aeronautical engineers in 2019 was. And so the median pay was $116,500. So this is a great way to think of earning potential. So what this number means is half of the population of aeronautical engineers made more than this number, and then half made less than this number. So this is a great way to think of earning potential as you move through your career in aeronautical engineering. I do want to reiterate, it's not something to expect upon graduation. I also did some research into the average salary of aeronautical engineers in the Albany area. I used Glassdoor, which is a great resource, and that was about $78,205. This did not take into account experience level, education level, or new or senior professionals, but this is just the average for the area. So this is really to help you get an idea of earning potential, and it's something that might help you in your own future salary negotiations after graduation. So on top of all of these hiring statistics that we can provide you, and again, 2019 should be coming out soon, um, there's a lot that we can do to help you in your career development as you prepare for your career in aeronautical engineering. So we can help with resume reviews, cover letter reviews, looking at negotiating salary or accepting job offers or even internships. We do interview preparation and mock interviewing. We can help you look at potential graduate schools. And when I say help you look, we really help through the that application process, looking at the timeline, and looking at those application documents that are required. And something else we can do is we can help you with your career exploration. So what can you do with your major? What are the types of roles that are available to you? What are the types of companies that are available to you within a specific major? Maybe in this case, it's aeronautical engineering. So this event that the Hub is putting on is a great way to learn and really explore the career of aeronautical engineering. So I wanted to give the contact information here. ccpd@rpi.edu is our general email that we check. It's checked almost all day, every day. You can schedule an appointment through Handshake with your career counselor. It's important to know all of your services are offered virtually in the fall. So we are not in the office, and we primarily use WebEx for all of our meetings. Again, I mentioned myself, Lindsay and Kristen are your counselors, and I did put these emails here. And I do believe that Kristen will email out this presentation, so you don't have to rush to write down any of this information. I did want to plug one upcoming event. If you're looking for a great opportunity to practice your networking skills, potentially meet some new employers, we're having an all majors networking night on Wednesday, December 2nd from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. So it's really meant to provide you with some networking opportunities so that you can practice interacting with employers, whether it's through group or one-on-one sessions in a particular field. I do want to highlight registration isn't open yet. It opens this week on November 18th. Once you register, you can then see the list of employers who will be attending. Once you view the list of employers, then you actually sign up for the different sessions. So if you register for an event, register for the event, but don't see any sessions that interest you, that's okay. By registering, you're just getting into the lobby to see who is attending. But networking practice is always great. So I encourage you to attend at least one session to really kind of practice your networking skills. So that's all I really have. I hope we might have some time for questions, but if not, please email me. Do not hesitate to reach out if anything comes up.
Yes, we absolutely have time for questions. Thank you, Emily. So if any of you do have questions that are perfect for a career counselor, it's a benefit to have the attention of Emily and Kristen and Lindsay every Monday night. So don't be shy. Type your question in now. I can read it for you. Or if you do have a quick question, you could even unmute your mic real quick if you'd like and ask your question.
Okay, I'll bite, Emily. It's Marie Diefenbach. I have a question for you.
Sure.
As you know, students interested in aero at RPI definitely major in aero, but some of them major in mechanical, and some students do the dual with aero and mechanical. I'm wondering if you could just speak to the relationship between a student's specific major that's on their degree and resume and everything, and their ability to apply for co-ops and jobs and internships that actually have a variety of job titles and job descriptions. I guess if you could just talk a little bit about, from your perspective as a career counselor, what's that relationship? Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So that's a really great question. So I'm going to speak specifically to the field of engineering and what I've noticed in different job descriptions. There's really pros and cons, to whether you want a dual major, whether you want to focus, on aero or on, mechie. That's really something that you can meet with professors about. You can look at some career options. But something to think about is a lot of students sometimes worry that maybe they're pigeonholing themselves into a specific career when they want to expand and try new things. So, what I would recommend doing is essentially doing some research. Start looking at some of the job descriptions that are out there, and not only looking at the description of what the job is doing, but what it requires. Oftentimes, what I see, especially in the aero, kind of aero and mechy industries and positions, is they're looking for a certain skills and knowledge base that you can get with either both majors, right? And so what you want to highlight to employers are, what do you bring to the table? How does your background in, majoring in aeronautical engineering make you a good candidate maybe for this mechanical engineering job, or vice versa? You want to highlight your skills and strengths, and what your knowledge base will bring to this company. So when you're looking at a lot of jobs, what you might see is something like that they require someone with a bachelor's in engineering. I mean, aerospace, mechanical, electrical, or related field. So what they're really looking for, you need to demonstrate to them that you meet this requirement, you have this background education, you have your bachelor's in aero engineering, and this is why you're a great fit. So you want to highlight your skills and abilities. And so what I often find with the mechie and aero is a lot of things are, I would say, transferable. A lot of those skills are transferable, and just utilized in different ways, or maybe even similar ways potentially between those two positions. So in your resumes and cover letters, you're really focusing on what you bring to the table, your strengths, your skills, and abilities. I hope that answers your question, Marie.
Thanks, Emily. It does. Thanks very much.
And just in the nick of time, we are now going to move into our panel. So thank you, as always, Emily. I really appreciate you hanging out with us and giving us some insight this week on aeronautical engineering. And, I love that answer to the question. Of course, just like last week, we're still in registration right now. So it does add some perspective to, as each of you students are picking your courses and thinking about next semester, again, it helps you think about where this is all going to be applied and the skills that you're going to pick up in your classes. So awesome. It's great how everything connects.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you, Emily. Have a great night. All right, so now I'd like to pass the reins over to Marie Diefenbach, and I will ask if she and the rest of our panelists, so our two alumni and our current student, if they could reveal themselves by turning their camera on. I guess there's no better way to say that. Turning on their cameras. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate your hosting tonight. And thank you to Emily from the Career Center. I am super excited to welcome a couple of great alums here tonight for Aero Industry Hour, and one of my favorite current students. I see a whole bunch of my first year students are here in attendance tonight, and some sophomores, which is really nice to see you guys again. I hope everyone's doing well with registration, and I know there's a ton of tests and stuff this week, so I really appreciate all of you tuning in tonight. I hope we have a good discussion. We have great guests, as I said, and I'm going to ask each of them just in turn to introduce themselves and just say their name, where they work, where they're from, and where they live now, and what their degree is. They all went to RPI, so I don't have to ask them what school they went to. So I'm going to start with Alex, and again, name, where you work, where you're from, where you live now, and your degrees. Thanks, Alex.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Alex Austin. I grew up in Rochester, New York, so not too far from RPI. And I did a dual aeromech for my bachelor's, and then I did the co-term program, so I got my master's in aeronautical. And right after that, I moved out to Los Angeles, California, which is where I am now. And I work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is one of a set of NASA centers located around the country. And JPL is a little bit unique because we're actually a laboratory of Caltech, the California Institute of Technology. And we're most known for robotic exploration of the solar system. So we do all of the Mars rover projects, the Voyager spacecraft. We also do a lot of Earth science missions and astrophysics missions as well, and occasionally touch on a few things in human exploration too. So it's a pretty cool place to work. We do a lot of cool and exciting projects, and I'll try to get the chance to tell you some more about that throughout the rest of the night.
Oh, you will, my friend, you will. We will definitely be revisiting those cool projects. Joan, do you prefer Joan or Joni tonight?
I like Joni.
Okay, so
yes.
Then that is what we're going to go with tonight, Joni. So just name, where you work, and where you came from originally, and where you live now.
Okay. Well, as we just learned, my name is Joni, and I originally grew up right outside of Worcester, Massachusetts. Worcester, I don't say that anymore though. And I went to RPI for my bachelor's in aerospace and mechanical engineering, and then I right after that moved to Illinois, where I got my master's degree at the University of Illinois in aerospace engineering. And from there, I moved to Pasadena, California. I also work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, so same place as Alex. Fun story, I actually have never met Alex. So JPL is a big place, but it's cool that there's a bunch of RPI grads that work there. It's a pretty cool place to work. Alex already introduced it, so I won't say any more about it right now.
Okay, cool. And we're definitely going to, our next question, we're going to ask you a little bit more detail about what both of you do on a day-to-day basis and about some of those cool projects we've been involved with. Thank you, Joni. And finally, Tara, last but not least, our current student representative of the Aero community.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm a senior here at RPI, so I'm not working right now because I'm studying. I previously worked at Tesla and Aerosonic and was supposed to be at SpaceX this summer, but because of circumstances with COVID, it was unfortunately canceled. But I will be heading there this summer, and I'll be on the Stage 2 Falcon 9 test and integration team. So the rocket that just went up yesterday, I'll be working on that project, which is awesome. I'm originally from Long Island. I was in Troy this semester, but I am home now. I came home this weekend, so I understand what a lot of you guys are going through being with the hybrid classes. It's been a weird semester, but you know, it is what it is. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about what's going on in Aero. But I know a lot of stuff has been changing, so I'm interested to see the changes.
Agreed. It has been a profoundly semester and continues to be so, and probably will be for another semester, I'm afraid. But we soldier on, we do the best we can, and it's nice to just connect when we can, even if it's in this format, right? Although I do miss seeing everybody in my office every day, for sure. So I want to ask each of you, because each of you took a slightly different path to end up as an official Aero major at RPI. Just wondering if each of you can talk about how that process played out. And I know Joni and Alex did the dual, Tara not so much. Tara just came from a whole different perspective to get to Aero. So I'm just wondering if you could talk, just each of you talk a little bit about that journey. And we'll start with Joni this time.
Sure. Let's see. I knew I wanted to do aerospace engineering pretty quick. I came in undeclared as a freshman at RPI, and then I took intro to flight, and I knew that I wanted to do that. And when I looked at the classes that were available for both the aeromechanical dual, at least I don't know how much it's changed since I did it, but there were basically 4 additional classes that I had to take to get the mechanical dual, and all of them were things that I was interested in. They were a lot more. There were a couple of labs, mechanical type labs, as well as some like an embedded control class, which is something that I had been very interested in doing. And so I knew that my interest lay in the sort of the aeronautical focus. But when I looked at the types of things that I would learn and in getting the mechanical aero dual, I was very interested in those and thought that it might make me a little more diverse for the future. So that's how I ended up sort of picking the dual degree. Was that all you wanted, Marie, or did you want us to go further?
Yeah, that's great. No, that's great, actually, Joni. Thanks, because I think it's something that whether to dual or not to dual is something that like all aeros wrestle with at some point. And if they talk to, older students, they're like, oh, just do it, and then you could go talk to Kurt Anderson, who will say, I don't like that dual. Or you could talk to Professor Herzo, who's like, I love the dual. And you just get all this conflicting information. So I like to ask, like how it played out for each of you, just so that students can see, like, you come to it from different perspectives. Some of them will just say, I want to do it for the job availability to be a mechanical, but I love that you felt like you wanted to take those specific courses, which is another great reason for doing that. So yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
May I add real quick that actually for me it ended up really very good, because the realm that I sort of went to, aerospace engineering, when you get up to higher levels, breaks down even further into a couple different specializations. And the specialization that I ended up in actually has a big focus in electrical robotics type thing. And so it actually ended up working really well for me today.
Which you would not have gotten at all in the straight up aero curriculum, right? Like not at all, really.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joni. How about you, Alex? What was your journey to the aero curriculum and the dual in particular?
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of similarities to Joni. So first of all, I guess I was always a super space nerd, and I knew I wanted to do aerospace. And going to RPI, I didn't really apply to many schools. Ironically, I know we like to compare to RIT, so since I'm from Rochester, I looked at RIT as well. They didn't really have an aerospace program. I really liked RPI because it wasn't too far from home. It was kind of a smaller school, but not too small. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. And I got there and I realized, well, I really like aerospace, but I didn't really know anything more than that. So I figured, well, I might as well try everything I can. And the dual made a lot of sense because it gave me the chance to try some different things. And early on, the idea of, maybe better job prospects was kind of there too, but it was more kind of similar to Joni, like all the classes looked interesting. And I was like, well, might as well. It's not going to take any more time. It's going to be a little bit more work, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And it worked out really well for me in the end. So my job now is I'm a formulation systems engineer, and we'll talk more about that too. But I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none, and I do a lot of different things. And when I talk about some other classes that I liked at RPI too, you'll see that I kind of tried to do as much as I could in the aerospace area. And for me, at least, that worked out really well because that was very much like what I wanted to be, and I wanted to try a lot of things. So going for the dual just made a lot of sense. I'm really happy with the decision. But for others that want to specialize more, if they know they want to do computational fluid dynamics, they love that field or something like that, it's okay if you really know you want to specialize in something like that too. So it just kind of depends on what your interests are.
And it's hard when you're a first-year student and even a second-year student with an aero to even know what you might want to specialize in, because you practically haven't taken any aero classes at all except for like fundamentals of flight, So it's almost like you kind of have, it's kind of almost an organic thing where you start taking the courses and you're like, oh, I really don't like fluids. I don't know what I was thinking. Or, I like the electrical side of it, or, so it's almost like you have to start doing it before you kind of figure that stuff out, right? So now we kind of put the dual major classes kind of towards the end. So it gives students the ability to kind of experience different aero courses and decide whether they want to add on material science and EI and EMD and MSL, So yeah, thank you for that perspective. And now Tara's, I have a feeling tonight, Tara, you're going to be like the outlier person in this, like one of these things is not like the other in Sesame Street, So, but that's part of why we wanted you here tonight, because I think your story is really interesting. So if you could talk a little bit about how you ended up being an aero.
Yeah,
so we met, you were not.
Yeah, I was actually not an aero when I first came. I started as a mechanical engineer and a DIS major. So the DIS kind of went away pretty quickly once I found out that it was not what I was expecting from that major. I did not know that I was not going to like engineering design when I got to school. I thought I was going to go into design engineering, and I thought I was going to be a mech, and I thought it was going to be great. And then turns out I hate mechanical design. So that kind of just was not going how I thought it was going to go. But I was always really interested in aerodynamics. I knew that it was something that was cool. I never considered actually being an aero engineer. I didn't even know that was a major offered at RPI, I think, when I got here. And then after many conversations with Marie stressing about what I wanted to do, I was also on the motorsport team. So then I really found out that I really did not like mechanical engineering there, but I fell into aero and I found a love for computational aerodynamics. So that's kind of how I got there. And then I also looked at all the aero mech classes like Joni did and found out that I didn't want to take any of them. And I have no interest in like electrical, or I took the material science class. That was a mistake. So I really love the aero curriculum. I think it's really I found my niche. I really like I'm in propulsion systems right now, and that's awesome. I like how varied it is. So it tries to give you kind of the different sections of aerospace engineering, because there are a lot and there are very different. Unfortunately, like the electrical stuff you don't get as much, but they try to be a little bit of a variation. Like we do have the CFD class, we do have the structures classes and the propulsion system. So I think that it is like there is a lot of variation in the aero that I don't feel like I'm being pigeonholed right now, at least. I think I have 2 semesters left, and my internships, I've done a lot of different stuff. That's also why I didn't want to do the mech dual, was because I did mechanical design and got some mechanical skill set from my internships, that I didn't feel like I needed to take the additional courses in order to get that stuff. And I'll be working on avionics this upcoming summer too, so I'll get some electrical, unfortunately, for my sanity.
It's good to have that exposure, though. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So I wanted to, for Alex and Joni, here's what I wanted to kind of like let you really talk about. What's your day-to-day look like, right? And, what does your job look like? What are some of the cool things you've worked at? What is the cool stuff that gets you to like get out of bed when it's dark in the morning? If it's ever dark in California, it's always dark here. It's dark here all the time right now, I have to tell you. So, so if you talk about the cool stuff about your job, what you've done, and like what you're working on now, that would be great. And just give us a sense of, as an aero at JPL, which is kind of like the mothership, like what's that like, and what do you do? So this time we'll start with Alex.
Yeah, sure. So this is going to be interesting for all of you, because I think you're going to get some different perspectives from Joni and I about JPL. And so Joni mentioned JPL is a pretty big place. I think we're up to something like 6,500 employees at this point, something like that. So I work in an area known as project formulation. So like I mentioned, some of the missions that we're most known for are planetary exploration missions, like the Mars rovers, the Cassini mission that was at Saturn for, I believe it was 13 years. I think Joni worked on that, so you'll probably get more details on that. So where I work in project formulation is where we're thinking of future missions. So my group is thinking about missions that are going to fly maybe 5 years from now, or even 50 years from now, if it's really futuristic. And specifically, I lead a couple teams in my group. One of them is the team that focuses on small satellites. So those are spacecraft. You might have heard of CubeSats, which are like very small, like the size of a loaf of bread or a cereal box. And we do missions up to like a couple 100 kilograms. We focus on those types of small missions, whether they be Earth orbiters doing Earth science, or missions that are telescopes doing astrophysics exploration, or planetary missions that are going to other planets. So that's kind of one thing where a lot of my time is spent on kind of that scale of missions. And there's been a lot of recent technology development that's allowed us to shrink those missions down and end up saving money as well, because we can generally do those types of smaller spacecraft a bit cheaper. So they're getting to be a much bigger thing. And we're very proud, especially of, you might have heard of the Marco spacecraft, which were 2 CubeSats that went to Mars with the InSight Mars lander. And those were the first deep space CubeSats. So we're particularly proud of that mission. So that's about half of my time working on those small mission formulations. The other half of my time is working on some technology projects that are applied to either small missions or bigger missions, and specifically in the field of entry, descent, and landing, which is what we use to enter the atmosphere of another planet like Mars, slow down, and then actually land there. And I bring that up because it's really interesting, because so when I went to RPI, I was super into space when I first started. And then I took all these classes on aerodynamics and things like that. And I convinced myself that I was going to go work on airplanes because I took so many classes involved with airplanes. And then it kind of all came full circle, and I ended up doing my capstone project for space. And then I kind of rekindled that interest and was like, no, I need to do space. But then I had this like dilemma where I realized I just spent all this time learning about aerodynamics, then I was going to go work on missions that operate in a vacuum. So I was going to be missing a lot of things. And then I found EDL, which is kind of, or entry, descent, and landing, which kind of combines it all, because we have to build spacecraft that have to travel to other destinations and then enter an atmosphere. So that was really cool. And it kind of goes back to my point about how I always kind of wanted to do a little bit of everything. And it worked out really well for me in the end. And I actually got to apply everything that I learned. And I get to, every day is a little bit different now, because all these missions that we are thinking about are all a little bit different. So it's really interesting. I mean, I really enjoy it. And I especially enjoy the formulation side of things, because we're kind of working fast. You know, we're thinking about what are these future missions going to be, and then hand them off to the implementation side of the house where they actually get built and flown. So it's pretty fun. It's been quite a ride. I've been at JPL for almost 5 years now, and it's amazing how much I've learned since I've come here.
I love that you talk about the entry, descent, and landing, because I had students over the 20 years I've been advising Aeros, complain because they were really interested in space and came to RPI for space. And there's, in the whole midst of most of the curriculum, they're all doing aerodynamics, all these terrestrial things. So it's nice to know that, you can actually kind of combine the two, and all that, studying did not go for naught, if you get involved with space. So that's very encouraging news.
It's amazing, how you'll find that things will all of a sudden come together, and, that class that I took that I thought I'd never use again ended up being super important. So, yep.
Which is one of the fun things about being out in the world, right? Because all of a sudden that stuff you swore you'd never use, it just becomes gratifying. You're like, all right, I didn't kill myself for nothing then, which is kind of nice. So Joni, going off on the JPL train, talk to us about your experience there.
Oh, sure. So let's see. Yeah, I think so. As Alex mentioned, it's kind of cool that we have two of us from kind of like both at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So I think in general, in the life cycle of a mission that we want to fly, There's Formulation, so that's Alex's people that actually come up with the initial concept and put some framework around it, and then hand it off to the folks that have to actually design and develop it, and then they hand it off to the folks that actually physically build it and have to test it, and then those people stick it on a rocket, launch it to space, and then hand it off to the folks that actually have to operate the spacecraft. So I started my job on the very opposite end of Alex in the operations area. So that was the first job I had, was working as Alex mentioned and remembered, the Cassini spacecraft, which was the first spacecraft to orbit Saturn. Voyager flew by Saturn but didn't orbit. And so it was at Saturn for 13 years, in space for a total of 20 years. And I got to work on it for operations for the last 4 years of the mission. And so my job specifically is a guidance and control engineer, or attitude control engineer. And so my job is essentially to worry about the orientation of the spacecraft in space. So we make sure that the cameras and science instruments are pointing at the right place at the right time, in order for the scientists to make their observations and do science experiments and that kind of thing. We also do things like protect the safety of the spacecraft. For instance, there are some cameras that if you point them at the sun, they'll get damaged because they get too hot or something like that. And so it's our job to sort of be aware of all of that stuff happening. So I did that job for Cassini for the first couple years. And then we crashed Cassini into Saturn's atmosphere, where it burned up in 2017. And so I had to find something else to do. And so now I'm working on the Europa Clipper mission, which is going to, in mid-2020s, launch and go to Jupiter to study one of Jupiter's moons, Europa. I'm doing the same job, guidance and control engineer, for that mission, but I did get to work on the design side of that one. So that was working on the flight software and all the controllers that we're going to use to control the spacecraft, and all of that. And like hardware, I actually worked on some hardware stuff, which was cool too. And the current job that I have right now is I'm the lead of 2 teams that are working on preparing for operations. So once the spacecraft launches, we'll be the folks that are operating the spacecraft, and we have to work even 4 or 5 years before it launches and writing all the software we're going to use for it, and planning how we actually are going to operate this really complicated billion-dollar machine. So my day-to-day, now that I lead a team, is a lot of meetings, and I make lots of flow diagrams in PowerPoint. I do get to still code a decent amount, so writing software and that kind of thing. So I do get to do some of that, but I did a lot more in my earlier phase of my career. Later, there's a lot more telling other people what they need to be coding. So yeah.
Can I ask kind of what might be a weird question? So, you're involved in the mission, right? A particular mission, and then, like that mission ends, right? And then, like, how do you then transition to another one? Like, do you have a boss that like puts you on another one, or do you get to look around and see like, what do I want to do next, and somehow let that be known? I have no sense of how that works.
So JPL, for people who know business things, is called a matrix organization, which means that we actually have 2 bosses. We have a boss on a mission side. So I had a Cassini boss and I have a Europa Clipper boss, but I also have a guidance and control boss. And so there's the sort of the boss people that are looking out to make sure that you have a place, another mission to go to. So I had some overlap between Cassini and Clipper to make sure that I did have somewhere to go. So yeah, in general, JPL is really good about that, making sure that you have something to do.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I just didn't know how that would actually work, like, do you have to scramble to find another project? So that's good to know, in terms of just stress, Thank you. So Tara, you've had some interesting internship and co-op opportunities, and I just wonder if you could talk about what you learned partially from having that one opportunity canceled. And then, like your experience with working from a big company, a small company, what your experience in internships has been, finding mentors, all those things that you kind of learned that I think it would be great for our students to hear.
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate with the variety of internships I've been able to get, and the one that unfortunately got canceled. That was hard, but like for me, as long as my family's healthy and everyone I know is healthy, it didn't bother me that much. I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, I'm able to go back this summer and be able to be on the same team doing the same job I would have been. Obviously, it would have been cool because I was supposed to be there during the first launch that they did in May, so that would have been awesome. Um, but you know, like it is what it is. This whole year is kind of is what it is, so that's fine. But I'm really excited to go there because I'm going to be able to be working on the propulsion systems and avionic systems for Falcon 9 Stage 2. So that's after the booster comes off that lands. The team that I'm working on, our part of the craft ends up in the Indian Ocean, so that's not that great, but it's going to be a really fun experience being able to do that this summer. Before that, in 2019, I took the entire year off to do co-ops. I started at a small company called Aerosonic located in Clearwater, Florida. There I did so many jobs. My main job was doing computational fluid dynamics, or CFD, on an air data system. So for air data systems for aircraft, those collect pressure measurements, altitude measurements, like pretty much all of the like aerodynamic characteristics surrounding the aircraft. It gathers all that information, so it goes to the flight computer so the pilots know what altitude they're at, what speed they're flying at, stuff like that. So really important stuff. So I was working specifically on pitot tubes, angle of attack sensors, and like all those type of measurement systems. So I did CFD analysis on all of those. I was able to do wind tunnel testing. I was able to do mechanical design. I mean, I was able to do a lot, and that was because I was very fortunate in finding an amazing mentor. Aerosonic has a great internship policy where every intern gets a direct mentor who assigns them projects and like pretty much cultivates their skills. I was really lucky. My uh, mentor had a PhD in CFD, was an amazing engineer. He could do everything, and he really taught me um, pretty much everything I know about engineering at this point. I credit to him. He was awesome, and that's once in a lifetime, pretty much, for finding that type of professional relationship was just so great for me. Um, because he pushed me. I had the right attitude too of just wanting to learn and not caring if I failed, but learning from my mistakes. I think like attitude is a huge thing. And then from there, I was able to go to Tesla, and I worked on the solar roof team, which is the integrated solar panels on the roofing tiles. So that was kind of an interesting experience because Tesla is in this transition period where like everyone knows them for cars, obviously, but they're really trying to break into the energy field, and they have been successful with the solar roof and the charging stations and the battery packs. All of that stuff is all wrapped into energy, including like the battery team. So it's a pretty substantial part of the company now. So I was supposed to be a mechanical design intern there, and then we all kind of figured out that that was not going to work. But fortunately for me and for them, they had to have an aero project on the solar roof team, which was kind of weird. We needed to analyze the dynamic response of the solar roof tiles with like wind loading conditions. So they had to have a wind tunnel test to do that. And I was like, perfect, I know how to do that. That's my major. So I was able to lead that project because no one else had any aero experience. So that was just like, again, right place at the right time. So I was able to lead the wind tunnel project, and that was awesome. I pretty much led the team of there was design engineers, reliability engineers, and then I had to coordinate with the wind tunnel. I had to coordinate with contractors because we had to have someone to build a model roof that was, I think, like 13 feet by 13 feet. So we basically built like a little shed, put a solar roof on it, put it in a wind tunnel, and ran it at hurricane category 5 conditions. So that was a really cool experience. But I was really lucky. In terms of working in big companies versus small companies, I think that going to a small company for me starting was the best idea. Tesla especially is notorious for like how difficult it is to work there in terms of like what they expect from you. And I would have not been ready if I went there first because I did have the opportunity to go there first. But going to Aerosonic, getting that experience of like knowing what it is to be an engineer, knowing what it's like to fail, having that mentorship experience really, I think, prepared me to get to the level that I was ready to go to Tesla, and now that I'll be ready to go to SpaceX in the summer.
That's great. Thank you. That's super helpful. Since we're talking about internships, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and ask Alex and Joni to weigh in on what their internship experiences were like, you know, what they might have learned if they can remember back that far, and, you know, if they have any advice for students concerning internships and co-ops. And we'll start with Alex this time and give Joni a rest for a second.
Sure, yeah. So I had 2 internships. One was, let's see, I think it would have been after senior year, but before I started my master's. And it was at General Dynamics Mission Systems in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And it was in their, what they called their project engineering department. And to be honest, I kind of took it because it's what I got, and I was just applying to as many things as I could. It was my first internship. But in my kind of spirit of wanting to try lots of things, it worked out really well, as things sometimes do, because that department was an interesting department where they were the people that, as project engineers, they helped the very technical group talk to the management group. You kind of had to have a foot in both of them. And that was a really interesting experience because, like it or not, a lot of engineering is managing. And it's not just about math and science. And when it comes down to it, there's a lot of budgets and schedules, and especially as you kind of advance in your career, Joni kind of alluded to this, that comes up more and more. So that was a really interesting internship experience to kind of see that. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was working on Navy programs, so it wasn't really aerospace, but it was a really good experience. Then when I was doing my master's, I was able to get an internship at JPL, and I was like, okay, well, this is great. And that was an awesome experience. I got to go to JPL for 10 weeks. I actually worked in the robotics group. I was working on a project for adding small robotic arms to satellites so that they could service other satellites. And about halfway through that internship, I realized that I was having a great time, but I wasn't in the right group because I was not a robotics engineer. And I wanted to be a systems engineer and work on the more kind of grand big picture of the mission. But once I was already at JPL, I kind of had my foot in the door, so I was able to go talk to people and end up getting an offer for the group that I'm in now. So both internships were really important. And I mean, I think the biggest takeaway was the one that I kind of just casted a wide net of as many applications as I could at General Dynamics was not really the job that I wanted in the end, but was still a really important stepping stone in where I am now. So, take what you can get and make the best of it, and things will normally work out.
I think you get some good life lessons there for sure. Yeah. And you just never. I've always felt no matter how weird and off track any job I had was, I always learned something from it. You know what I mean? And you just carry that forward always, right? And yep. Sometimes it just might even be the kind of warning signal that a job's not the right one for you, or it could be just like these things that you kind of experience, accumulate these experiences, and they just kind of help direct you as you go on and on and on in your career. So yeah, I think making the best of what you can, and I think particularly in this current climate that we're in, where the economy is so weird and we're kind of in this weird limbo, I think that making the best of what you have could not be more relevant right now, actually. I really don't think so. Joni, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your internships, because you also had a couple of really different experiences.
Sure. Yeah, I actually had 3 different internships, 2 while I was at RPI and then 1 in my master's program. And so the first one was after my sophomore year. And so that was definitely a take what I can get one. And that was at GE Aviation in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that was an interesting one because it was in the GE Aviation company. And so like aviation, but it was actually in the department where they adapted their jet engines for use in industry, so as power generators. And so it was just an interesting, like, that there wasn't actually like flying involved. Of course, there, you know, still had the turbines and things like that. But so that one, I learned that one I was, you know, still very early on at RPI, and the thing that I took away most from that one, thinking back, was that was my first, you know, venture into what's like to actually have a real job, and have like business casual wardrobe and things like that. So, but what I really learned from that was that that gave me a picture into industry and what it's like as a job, and a for-profit company. My second internship was at NASA Langley, which is one of the NASA centers, and that one's in Virginia. And so having those two next to each other was really important, because the feel of working in a for-profit agency is very different from the feel of a non-for-profit agency like NASA, which is a government agency. And so I think those two things gave me a very wide, the sort of the two different things. Okay, what do you want to do? That one at NASA Langley was a lot more researchy than the one at GE Aviation. And the one I did my master's was at Lockheed Martin, and that was focused on my master's thesis, sort of continuing my master's thesis work there. So that was another window into an industry job, but more in the sort of area that I wanted to be in. And so from that experience, I knew that I was more interested in a nonprofit agency like JPL. So the one thing I would say, I think it's really important to have this sort of take what you can get attitude and make the best of learning situations. The only thing I'll note at the end of that is that at least JPL, and I imagine there are other companies like this, recruit very heavily from their intern population. So especially as you get towards your later internships, that if you have an idea where you want to work a little bit early, then you can target getting an internship there, because that gives you a huge leg up into sort of getting an offer. I never had an internship at JPL. I still work at JPL, so it's definitely possible, but it definitely helps you out a little bit if you have that foresight.
That's great. And actually, one of the students messaged in a question about internships, and Michael asks, what years would you recommend finding internships, and when should we start looking? So, I mean, in this crowd, you know, you've got students who had internships who started after sophomore year. Tara, I can't remember. Did you have an internship after freshman year? I can't remember.
No, I was held up in bed
between
freshman and sophomore year with the back.
So it was sophomore year for you as well. And then Alex was a little later. So, I mean, you know, my sense is it depends. I mean, I would look and certainly throw yourself out there in the market, right? And if you're lucky enough to get one, great. And sometimes, you know, it's just the function of the market. If you don't get one, sometimes companies will be saying, you know, you're not much use to me after only sophomore year because you haven't had any fundamental aero courses, right? They might say, you know, we would love to have you, but, you know, you don't have these particular skill set. And I think when should you start looking? I was going to say as soon as possible, right? I mean, you know, you'll designate the semester you're looking for, right? What would you say, Tara?
I was gonna say, I mean, like now with Arch, it's a little bit different, but I also think that everyone, I think, is also different in terms of when they're ready to intern. I felt ready to intern after my third year RPI. I left like the spring semester of my sophomore year. I have friends that didn't want to leave until, like, I think Arch, the last time you can go is, I think, your spring semester junior year. So I think it also is just dependent on when you're ready. I wasn't personally ready after freshman year, and I knew I wasn't ready, so I didn't even bother looking. But sophomore year, I definitely felt like I was ready. So I think it also just depends on how you're feeling. If you don't feel ready, you can still put your name into the ringer and see where you get, but I don't think you should feel pressured to start for freshman year or early sophomore year if you don't feel like you're ready to do that.
I think that's really good advice. And as a practical question, the same student said, where do you live during the internships away? Like, how do you get someplace to live? I think that's a really good question. Any of you want to chime in on how that played out for you guys? Because you went all different places.
Road trips. That usually the internship programs give some type of stipend for a living situation. So like a place to live. And you get paid, enough to be able to buy food and stuff like that. But in terms of how I got to places I drove, my internships never got further than Colorado. And so I would drive from the East Coast to the different places. So I could have my car with me to be able to get around.
Alex, how did that work for you, honey?
Yeah, so for me, for the Pittsfield, Massachusetts internship, it was kind of easy because it's not that far from RPI, and I grew up in New York anyways. So yeah, I had a stipend. I found an apartment. I stayed there for 10 weeks. For my JPL internship, that one was a little bit crazy because, it wasn't like when I moved out for my full-time job. It was like, all right, it's 10 weeks, but I'm going to go literally across the country and just pack up a suitcase. And, I found a place to live in Los Angeles. As you can imagine, the living situation is a lot different there. You don't get when you're an intern, you don't get your one-bedroom apartment to yourself. You share it with a lot of other people because it's pretty expensive. But in the end, I really enjoyed the experience. It was cool. It was a brand new city. I'd never lived in a big city like that before. And I took it as one of the experiences out of it, right? Because, I was going to go to this internship. It was going to be 10 weeks. If I liked it, I could try to get a job there. If I hated it because I knew I didn't want to live in a big city, at least I tried it, right? So that was an interesting internship experience, not only for the job, but for the living situation for me. But I kind of decided to give it a try because why not? I think it's take that opportunity if you get it. So I'm really glad that I did.
And Tara, you went to Florida and then I assume you were in California with Tesla, or yeah, how did that work out?
I just need to get Washington to get the four corners of the United States, but Florida, I was lucky. One of the main reasons I took that internship over the whole, take what you can get type of mentality, because I definitely had that too. My sister went to University of South Florida, which is in Tampa, which is only 45 minutes from the office that I was supposed to work at, and she happened to have a car down there, so I kind of stole her car. Her roommate had just moved out of their apartment, so I took that room, and it kind of worked out that way. The other interns had a lot more difficult time finding housing in Clearwater because it's right on the ocean in Florida, and it's kind of a weirdish area in terms of there's not really a lot of apartments and stuff, and none of them could afford to ship a car down, and they were from all different areas of the United States, so that was a little bit strange. I just was very lucky with how that worked out. For Tesla, I was in the Bay Area, which is notoriously very expensive. So I shipped my car out there. Tesla, I think, gave us a $3,500 stipend, which was supposed to be a housing travel stipend, and then I got paid on top of that. So I used that money to ship my car out, and then I was paying a lot of money to live with 3 strangers in a house in San Jose. So, it worked out. I met really nice people, and it will be a very similar situation this summer, except it will be even more expensive because I'll be living in the beach area of LA and Manhattan or Hermosa Beach. So that's going to be a nice chunk of my paycheck. If you're going to go to the Bay or areas in LA, Colorado and Washington, you're going to have to expect to pay. But the companies should give you enough money in salary that it shouldn't be that distressing to at least pay for housing. I definitely recommend shipping a car out. That was great. I know a lot of people that did not get a car, did not have cars, especially in the Bay, and that was really hard for a lot of people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, Joni, you started talking about when you were doing your thesis for your master's, and that kind of leads me into my next question. Both you and Alex decided to pursue your master's right after undergrad, and Alex stayed for co-terminal. Joni, you went to Illinois, obviously. So I'm wondering if you could each kind of talk us through, what made you want to do that, right after undergrad, what was that decision like, and how you feel that has turned out. So I'll start with Joni this time.
Okay. So let's see. I knew I wanted to get my master's as soon as I was done my bachelor's, because I did not trust myself to be able to work and then have to get back into the groove of going to school. And knowing myself, I didn't think I personally would be able to do one of the cases where you were working and getting your master's simultaneously. There's lots of people that do it, and awesome for them. I did not think I had the fortitude. I'm trying to, it was a combination of wanting to try living somewhere else. My decision to not stay on it at RPI, but there was also a large portion of I had kind of decided the type of specialization that I wanted to go into, and so I looked for the universities that had sort of the more niche areas. And so I applied to several of those. And the reason why I chose the University of Illinois is because the University of Illinois paid me. They offered me that they paid my tuition, and I got a stipend for doing the research work that I was going to write my master's thesis for. And so that was a huge thing, to not have to pay tuition. And I got to experience, what, in other universities' department is like, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's how I ended up at Illinois.
That's helpful. And Alex, how about you? What made you want to go right away for the co-terminal masters, and B, I guess, stay at RPI for that?
So some similarities and some differences to Joni. So the similarity, I didn't trust myself to go back to school, and figured I just wanted to get it done. And I knew, I guess not right away when I was a freshman, but pretty soon into it, that I would want to get the master's. It seemed like it would be necessary for any of the careers that I was looking at. But a difference would be that I didn't really have something that I really wanted to specialize in. I actually saw the master's as a chance to try something related but a little bit different. And I didn't really have a desire to leave RPI at that point. I mean, I had met a lot of people. I was having a good time. So I definitely wanted to do something aero related, but I actually took the opportunity to kind of do a bit of I guess it's not a 180 because it's still aero, but I actually specialized in Dr. Gandhi's rotorcraft lab. And I did computational fluid dynamics of multiple small rotors, like on a quadcopter, very close to each other, and how the fluids would interact between those rotors, which was just kind of different, but was really interesting to me, and something that I had focused more on either fixed wing or on spacecraft in my capstone. And I figured, well, like, I've done planes, I've done spacecraft, so I guess I'll try helicopters. And that's what I did for my master's. And I'm really glad I did it because, first of all, working with Dr. Gandhi was awesome. And also Assad Oberoi, who's now moved out to Los Angeles, so I get to see him every once in a while. But it was a really good experience because I got to do some CFD. It was something that I wasn't really aware of. Computational fluid dynamics, which I know Tara's very interested in. Again, that all kind of came back full circle, and I mentioned my entry, descent, landing work, where now a lot of that work is not rotorcraft, but it's the same types of code that we were using for that. It was another one of those situations where I kind of wanted to try something, and it all kind of worked out in the end. So a little bit different, but also similar to Joni's experience.
And I have to break for questions in a minute, but I wanted to ask Tara, like, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking in terms of masters, no masters? If you get a job, you're going to go right away, or what are you thinking?
I'm set on getting a job, but I definitely have the same worries that Joni and Alex did about not wanting to go back to school after. But after talking to all the people that I've met in industry, most of them have pushed me to get a secondary degree, especially with aero. I think it's important. With RPI's aero curriculum too, it's a little bit more general. And And I think it's important if you're going into a specialty to get one. Like either if I end up in CFD, it's pretty much I kind of have to get a PhD. So that's something to consider. Most of the people that I've talked to in the industry said that CFD, you kind of do need a PhD, just because it is very complex and there's a lot to it, and a year is not going to be enough. But if I do decide to go the propulsion route, I think a master's will just be fine. So I do plan on going back, but I would like to at least work for a little bit, figure out exactly what I want to get, and then do it.
Sure, that makes all sense. So I still have a bunch of questions, but Kristen is kind of giving me the stink eye that I have to leave some time for questions for students. So I'm going to give Kristen the opportunity to read any questions that she's gotten privately and open it up for a minute or two to see if students actually have questions they want to ask. And then if they don't, we can just go back to the rest of the questions that I have as waiting. So so Kristen, you want to give us the question that you've got, and then we'll open it up for students.
So the one question I got was already answered, because it seems like the students had very similar minds with their questions so far. And the question I got was, when would be a good time to look for an internship? So I think we covered that pretty well.
So let's ask students if they want to. I don't see anything else in the chat, but if students, I want to give them an opportunity to just turn their mics off and ask any of our esteemed panel anything that they want. And then if they don't have any questions, we'll just go back to some more on our end. Is that okay, Kristen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have math 6 minutes left.
No,
so
no, too fast. So
I know, it was a pretty fast hour.
If any of the students want to ask any specific questions, feel free. Don't be shy. It's a very easygoing crowd we have tonight. These are not scary people. I can tell. Tara and Alex and Joni are lovely, and they're not going to bite your head off or think you're asking a silly question. And then if not, I'll go back to some of the questions that we had talked about. So I'll give it another couple of seconds for everybody to unmute themselves.
I did get another private question, mostly, well, not for our panelists, but definitely something that I think a bunch of you will be wondering, which is, where can you find a recording of this? So as always, I will be sending out information tomorrow about tonight's panel. So that'll include contact information and a link to the YouTube playlist where we have all the recordings for all the industry hours, which actually I wanted to throw out a plug. And Joan and Alex, it might make you laugh a little bit, but last week for biomedical engineering, we actually had another alumni who worked for NASA, but totally different, approach to it, obviously being a background of biomed. So if anyone, any of you students who are listening want to hear that take on it too, because, there are definitely undeclared students in the room. If you didn't make biomed, you can get 2 takes on how to work for NASA, which is pretty cool. So I'll stop talking just in case anyone has questions.
Excuse me. This is a question mainly for Tara and Joni. Have you seen any of the issues in the industry as like women in engineering with like the because I know we're the minority and still in this field, and like, have your places of work been super accepting, and like, has it not just been an issue at all, or what?
We'll have Joni go first, and then I'll throw it over to Tara. Great question, Juliet. Thank you.
Sure. So I think for the most part, it's been great. JPL is great. I have not personally run into issues. I think there are still pockets. It depends on the type of stuff you're doing, right? Like you hear, like, especially some of the areas where it's a lot of a lot of the techs. So the men that are in their, like 70s and haven't retired yet, right? That's the area that you get a lot more of the a little bit of the talking down, but I haven't personally experienced that. That's just hearsay. But for me, I've had a really good positive experience. I feel valued and not any different, not treated differently in any way. So it's been good for me.
Awesome. Thank God. How about you, Tara?
I've had a little bit of just interesting experiences in terms of at Aerosonic. When I got there, the only woman in engineering there was she was like the engineering program manager, and then it was like 30 dudes. So that was kind of interesting. So I walked in as I also was the only one who was under the age of like 40 there. It was a little bit of an older crowd. When I walked in, the director of engineering was like, "It looks like a graveyard in here." So that was a little bit interesting. I didn't have any problems there. Tesla was also, I was one, I think there were 4 women on a team of 60. So, I mean, it is it is intimidating. I was on motorsport, and that was also like there was like 3 of us out of like 40 people, like 30 like real full members. So I kind of got used to it. But I think for the most part, I haven't had any issues. People usually are pretty good at taking it for face value, especially now. I think it's an issue that most people are aware of and are actively trying to make better. But Aero in general is pretty bad in terms of the gender gap. Like I see it in my classes still. It's not great, but it is definitely getting better. And I know RPI in general and engineering in general is getting better. So I don't think that it's something to be scared about. And I think it is good to ask questions like that. I asked that on my interview too. SpaceX, I'm lucky enough to have my mentor is a woman, so I'm gonna be able to have that experience. And she said that at SpaceX there was one issue she had with someone, and he was immediately dealt with, and it was like her manager dealt with it immediately, and it was rectified very quickly. So that's really good to hear for me and for I think everyone too, and for men too, because it's a problem that affects everyone.
Sure. I think that's a great answer, and I think that's a really still sadly irrelevant question, Juliet. So thank you for that question. And I think, the more experience you have, I think it gives you a little more confidence, and so that when you're entering that room, whether you're just a male student in your first internship or a female student in your first internship, I think the more experience you have, you get kind of more comfortable in your own skin as an engineer or as any position that you go into. And I think that kind of helps you as you go along for sure. And then there's always the fake it till you make it kind of thing too, right? You kind of project a little bit of a don't mess with me attitude, and sometimes that comes across, right? So I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to be respectful of the students' time. I definitely have some more questions, and we sent out this pre-program questionnaire, and I know that Alex and Joni had some other things, and Tara, that they wanted to talk about. So if you guys are okay hanging out, and we can continue this conversation. But Alex, Joni, Tara, if any of you have to pop off, 100%, no worries. And obviously, if any students want to pop off, absolutely feel free. There's, just please feel free. So are we okay? Are you guys good, or to go for just a little while longer?
I can go for about another 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. I promise it won't be longer than that.
I apologize, Marie. I do have to go. It's only 4 p.m. here, so there is one other thing I have to do at the end of the day.
Understood, Alex. You're taking time out from your busy day. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Please don't get fired from JPL because of us.
No. Well, thank you so much for having me, and best of luck to all the students. I know how it is. I realized the other day that I'm coming up on being out of RPI longer than I was at RPI, which is a little scary. But best of luck. And if you have any questions and want to reach out to me, feel free. So thank you.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate it. So one of the things, Joni, that you talked about in the pre-program materials we sent out was kind of the importance too of classes at RPI that dealt with things like group work, leadership, teamwork, and like managing other people, right? And sometimes engineers kind of complain about those classes while they're here anyway. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, why you said that and, what the importance has been and what you've seen maybe out in industry that you kind of now value that maybe not at the time. So I was wondering if you don't mind talking about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it was something I wanted to talk about just because I think it is something that engineers, and I will admit, sorry, Marie and Kristen,
That's okay.
representing the institute, that professional like PD1, I got the Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. slot, and I was so mad. Like I had to get up early and go to this class that I felt like, what am I doing? I'm taking this personality test. Like, what the heck is the point of any of this? And I cannot tell you how many times I have used Myers-Briggs like in my brain and knowledge of like, oh, this person just like needs to be talked to differently. Because and so the PD1 is an example, but then all of the group projects I would always get really irritated. It's like, well, I just want to do the work that I want to do because I get good grades and I want to have a really good GPA, and I don't want these people dragging me down, and I don't want to have to like be responsible for what they're doing, and I just want to be judged on my own merit. And unfortunately, the reality of the world is that's just not true. Most of engineering nowadays feels like it's a lot of teamwork. Like even if you're doing something on your own, you have to come back to the group, and that piece fits into the larger whole. And so my entire job is coordination. That it's so rare that you're ever just working like individually, and that only your immediate superior will care, right? Lots of people care what you're doing. So all of the group dynamics and all the annoyances of having to work with other people that think differently than you, and work differently than you, maybe don't want to work as hard as you do, or want to work way harder than you think is necessary, right? All of those things don't go away, and that's the majority of your life in a work environment, as opposed to the minority of your time. So as much as I was annoyed by them at the time, I think they were so important and so valuable for my experience now working on teams.
And I think you are really preaching to the choir there, because most students feel the same, and I certainly always felt the same. I hated group projects, always did. And when I first started advising students at RPI, I would say, "Oh, I'm just warning you, this is one of those classes, And I really had to change my tune on that, because you could not be more right. I mean, there's so few jobs in almost any discipline where you just get to sit in a cubicle all day and not interact with other people, right? It's just such a rarity, and it's so valuable to learn those skills. Even if while you're filling out that Myers-Briggs thing, you're thinking, what the heck? You know what I mean? Tara, I'm wondering, you're still in the thick of those courses. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think a little bit that maybe because Joni's out, I totally agree. Like 100% agree. They are very useful. I've learned so many lessons and interpersonal skills. It's just like in the midst of it, it's even harder right now being online. I'm in fluid dynamics lab online right now, so it's been very interesting to have a group of 6 people. Only 2 of us can go into the lab to do it. It's the wind tunnel lab. So it's been a very interesting experience. I've learned a lot about communicating. Especially like at my internships, I was used to communicating with people in different locations and different time zones. This is taking it to a whole nother level too, because of the deadlines and the grades and everything. So I definitely think that I think that there should probably be more group projects. I know everyone would probably do groaning right now, but honestly, with every single internship that I've done, the projects that I've done in classes have been much more useful than any test I've ever taken. Like just between dealing with people, dealing with the real world, but also like design, learning about the design process, learning about manufacturing processes, just how things work. I think projects are so important. I see more and more professors, especially in Aero, doing either an optional project or doing projects during the semester. That I think are great. Like I'm doing an aerostructures project right now. And that group has been great. I do have to say that's the best group project I've been in, but there are going to be annoyances, but I think it's really important to do group projects and get a feel for what it's going to be like to deal with frustrations, because that's what, in reality, some of engineering is going to be dealing with people.
And I would argue much of life. So Joni, I know you have to get back to your day and I don't want to keep you, but I just want to give you an opportunity here at the end, I would say if there's any advice, any piece of advice that you want to, to offer to the students, or if you could go back to first and second years or anything you would do differently, any recommendations at all, any advice you might want to last minute before you head back to the rest of your workday, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is I spent so much of my time stressing about my grades and my GPA. And now I am not going to say that having a high GPA was not helpful to me. Having a very high GPA put me, it gives you another leg up in the job search, depending on the types of places you want to work. JPL is very selective. So there's, not saying grades don't matter. But also sometimes, like, I actually can't remember what my actual GPA was graduating from RPI, because it just becomes not relevant, right? It's very relevant for getting a job initially, but if I was 0.1 lower, like, that would not have made a huge difference in my where I am eventually. So I think that would be the one the one thing that I would say is, like, to try and work better than I did at finding a balance of, like, still respecting the fact that grades and classes are important, but they are not the end all be all.
I think that is great advice, because we sometimes do get a little hung up on it, and sometimes there's just a weird competitive vibe at RPI about those decimal points and stuff, and and you do realize that, like, once you get that first job, like, nobody ever cares and nobody talks about it, because you are not that number, you are what you do, right? The value that you bring to your job, the value you bring to your organization, and nobody cares what that number is, because they're not necessarily related, and once you're there, it's you, it's not 3.85 Joni, you know what I mean? So I think that's great advice, and sometimes you need that perspective, especially if you have overbearing parents who really care about that number too, that's super helpful perspective. Joni, I really thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'm going to let you go, and then I'm just going to let Tara address the GPA issue, and then we'll wrap it up tonight. Joni, thanks so much. It was awesome. It was really nice. Thank you so much.
Good luck, everybody.
So Tara, I'm going to let you answer that GPA. I know you have a perspective on GPA, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so I'm here to say that the exact same thing of GPA does matter, but also it doesn't matter. It's a balance. I did not do the right things my freshman year. I really struggled to get my footing, and some of you may be in that same situation, and I'm here to tell you it's okay. You can recover from that. It's not the end of the world if you get a C in Physics 1, because I did. And then I ended up working at Tesla, and I have an internship at SpaceX. So it really, you can recover from most things. I mean, most people I know who went to go work for great companies like Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, you go down the line of aerospace companies, they got a D in a class, they got multiple C's. Life happens. I think also companies are getting better at recognizing that you should not be judging people on what they did freshman year, because that's not indicative of what they're capable of. And also, like, RPI 2 is notorious for how difficult the entry-level classes are. I can attest to the fact that the upper-level classes are much easier. Like, I'm pulling grades I never thought I could pull after freshman year. So I ended up actually having under a 3.0 after freshman year, and being able to get an interview and a job offer from Tesla. So there are companies out there that don't care. I was never asked about my GPA at Tesla. I have been asked now by SpaceX, they asked why it was lower than, I think their desired GPA, they said was like a 3.5. I have a 3.2 right now, and it's getting higher every semester now that I'm in upper level classes. So it's really not the end of the world, and I encourage everyone to be calm if you do end up with a lower GPA than you're expecting. Like I had like I don't know, a 108, something ridiculous in high school. I was like third in my class, and then I came to RPI and that did not happen, and that was totally unexpected because I excelled in academics. So I think that everyone has a different experience, and I think it's really important to just get knowledge because I think at the end of the day that really matters. Like at the end of the day of the interview, I didn't get my job because I had a 3.9 or a 2 point whatever. I got my job because I knew what I was talking about in the interview. And I wouldn't go back and change the fact that I was on motorsport, that I was really involved in motorsport to get a 3.9 because I learned way more at motorsport than I would have ever learned in physics 1 or chem 1 or all those classes. That, not to say that you should be getting C's and D's and that it's okay. I learned from my mistakes. I learned how to study. I've worked my butt off to get, I think I had like a 3.9 last semester GPA. So like I've worked very hard to get to the place I am now, but it was because I didn't do the right things first. So I think figure out how to study. That's number one. I found that getting back tests from APO, doing them, memorizing how to do them, and then going back and looking at my notes and writing crib sheets, even if you can't have that for the test, is my way of studying. Some people want to read the textbook cover to cover. Some people watch the lecture videos again. Find what works for you. Go to office hours and meet your professors and TAs. That is immensely helpful in finding out how homework is done, how your professors think, how your TA grades. I think I was too scared to go freshman year. I now go to most office hours, and I know all my professors know me by name and face, which is great. And I've been able to build relationships I didn't think I was going to have. So I think that's also key. And also attend every class. That was the worst thing that I did freshman year, was I did not attend a lot of the lectures, and that was a huge mistake because then you learn that you know none of the material when you didn't actually go learn it. It's a little bit different now that we have recorded lectures, but when I was a freshman, that was not a thing. None of my classes were recorded. We were lucky if PDFs were posted online of notes. So, that was a mistake of mine. I now go to every lecture. It doesn't matter if I have an 8 a.m. I'm going to have a 6:45 to 8:30 p.m. class next semester. That's going to be rough, but I'm going to go. So there's a lot of things that you can do to be successful. But at the end of the day, 1 C is not going to kill you. I have 3 C's, I think, on my GPA or something like that, and I'm fine, and I'm doing fine. So I don't think that, I think freshmen especially are very concerned. Now everyone just talks about how much we all failed. Like everyone was like lying about how great they were doing freshman year. Then I found out like most of my friends had like a 3.0 under freshman year. We're all too embarrassed to talk about it. But it's normal at RPI, unfortunately.
Well, Tara, thank you for that. And I really appreciate your honesty and your generosity and willingness to talk about that and to share, your experiences. And there's a reason why you're one of my favorites, my friend, a reason. So let's see. Oh, someone does have, John's got a comment. People are always talking about how they're failing in Discord. Well, I think that's probably healthy, because I think it's better than everyone pretending that everything is great. So, I mean, at least, I don't know how you feel about that. I think it's kind of refreshing to hear people are being honest.
Yeah, I mean, now to be on the other side of like the curve, like, because before it was like, here's the average of the test, and I was usually at the average, and now it's like, here's the average of the test, and you're a little bit better than the average. I feel a little better, but I still commiserate with the people who are like, wow, that test was really hard. Because even like if you do well, a lot of the tests are really hard. So I'm glad that people are a little bit more open now about it, because I like when I think it's also different being online, being a little bit more anonymous too. But like when I was a freshman, I feel like I didn't know that anyone else was like also getting 60s on chem tests. I thought I was like the only one, but turns out that was like everyone. So
we talk about that aspect of RPI culture a lot in the hub, and because we we kind of know a lot of times what students are doing, and we know that they're not doing that great. And then, they'll come out of a test and you'll hear them in the hallways and they'll say, oh, yeah, that was easy. And then like later they'll come in and they'll say, I just failed the test or something. And you're like, wait a minute, but like nobody wants to, it's just like this culture where, traditionally people have not wanted to admit when they're struggling. So I'm actually, John, a little bit glad that people are at least admitting it, So, I think that's kind of healthy. So I know that Tara has an exam tomorrow in a very hard class, so I want to let her go. And I just really want to thank her and all our guests for everything and all their time and their generosity and real honesty. I think it was a great discussion tonight. Tara, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Kristen, we're all set, right? Nothing else we need to do?
Nope, nothing else we need to do.
Awesome. I want to wish all the students that are on tonight a good break. I think everyone is ready for a Thanksgiving break right now. I hope you all get home safe and continue to be safe and healthy. And there's probably some of you on here that I probably owe an email or two to, and I apologize. I will get to that one of these nights. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here tonight. Thank you for hosting, Kristen. And again, Tara, awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody, and a wonderful holiday.